There's even been, what do they call it, when you stack rocks. But they were doing it with artillery shells. Like literally unexploded artillery rounds and mortar rounds and stuff like that. So if like you tried to do that, you might blow yourself up. So somebody was able to do that. And there was one of them that was like 8 feet tall. Like literally like stacked all these rounds up like 8 feet tall. And it was very thin, and there's no way it should have been able to stay standing. My name is Brett Franklin. I grew up in what you would call a metaphysical household. My mother was a hedge witch of the English tradition. She tested all of us as kids, and out of my 3 siblings, I was the only one that tested out. After a few years, basically brought in different teachers. She used to do the lecture circuits. One of the people that she used to bring around was a guy named Sunbear of the Medicine Bear clan up in the Coville Reservation. He was a good friend of my mom's and one of my early teachers. We also end up pretty much getting almost anything you name it, which is shamans, mystics, martial artists, pretty much anyone who had an inkling for any mystical abilities. As children, we were taught that supernatural beings were real. They were never stories, they were never make-believe. They were real, living, breathing beings. They often what's the word I'm looking for here? Transferred from one realm to another. They were interdimensional beings. That includes the Fae, Dogmen, the Forest People, the Moss People, any of it. So growing up that way was very different. You often had to keep your mouth shut when people were saying things. You just kind of kept it quiet. You didn't want to out yourself because, let's face it, Salem wasn't that long ago, and we remember. So, aside from that, growing up, we had a lot of supernatural things happening around. When I was 17, I had joined the Marine Corps. Basically went in, delayed entry program, went in at 18. Spent 8 years in the Marine Corps. Got out for 8 years. Did various other work, security, bouncing, bartending. Then I went back in another 4 years. But this time I joined the Army instead. Spent 14 months over in Iraq during OIF 3. Pretty much every place I've ever been in the military, the Forest People and other beings have always been there. Every single one. From Fort Lewis to the Aberdeen Proving Grounds to what's left of England Air Force Base to 29 Palms, California. Every single place I've ever been has had them there and has had a bit of a paper trail dictating that they have been there, reports and whatnot. 29 Palms still has the bent rifle sitting in the armory where a guard was basically accosted by a yucca man, which is a desert Sasquatch. And that was in 1972 when that happened. When I was 5, my family, we were camping over in the Tillamook County Forest, or Tillamook National Forest over in over in Oregon. We were just a standard campground. There's a river that kind of goes in the backside of it, and it split, and it had a dry creek bed during the summer. And my sisters were down there playing, and I was 5. I wandered off from the camp. I was about maybe 150 feet away from the camp, but there was a lot of trees and everything in the way, so no direct line of sight. And I had seen an alligator lizard. The creek basically splits into two. There's basically big giant logs, 40, 50 foot long logs that go across it. Well, it's dry. My sisters were down there playing. I figured I'd go see what was going on. I wandered away from camp about 150 feet or so, and I saw this little alligator lizard, right, which we have here in the Pacific Northwest, and I saw it, and I bent down to look at it, and then I heard crunch behind me. I turned around, and there he is. 9-foot male, black hair, dark gray skin, and he's squatted down, like he's trying to get down to my height, squatted down as best he could. And he's just looking at me. I look over at him, and that's when it popped in my head. You see me? Question mark. And I'm about ready to say yes when he goes, I turn around, look where he's pointing. And he's pointing at our camp. I turn back around, gone. Didn't hear, didn't see, nothing. Gone. He was very human-like. There's no question, they are a people. They are not apes. No matter what someone in Idaho might tell you, they are a people. It was no big deal. My dad, even though he wasn't on the mystical side, he got it. He wasn't worried about it because it didn't do anything to me. My mom, when it came down to it, that was also a clincher. It wasn't very long after that she tested me. So if I'm seeing and beings are coming up to me, she was like, okay, that's a big red flag. I got to test this kid. She normally would not have tested me because I was male. There's a term that used to be used called spiritual pressure. The Japanese call it reishi. It is your ability to project, whether you would call that chi, mana, or psychic energy, psionics, your ability to manipulate and to be able to emit that, and whether you can accept it and use it as well. So it's basically testing to whether you have that ability. Some people, nothing. Deadline. They have no ability whatsoever. Others, they can see auras, they can project energy, they can affect the physical world around them. That was part of the test, to see if I was one of those. Turns out I was. But my mom, she taught me the little bit more than the basics of traditional witchcraft. But then again, I also was taught a lot of the fundamentals of basic shamanism. I was taught martial arts. I was taught how to use that energy with all of those things. I found out later that those things also have military applications. I had seen things, dealt with things. I also had what you might classify as abduction when it comes to the sky people or alien abductions. There was a time when I was not much older than 5 when literally we had a craft land about 50 feet up in the air right in the front yard. And a pair of one short, one tall grays walked through the wall. Through it. And then literally, I could not move. I could not speak. I was fully aware of what was happening. They literally touched my body, lifted me up with just their fingertips, and moved me through the wall and then into the ship. After that, I remember nothing. But that's not the only time that has happened throughout my life, and throughout other family members as well. So it does track bloodlines. When I was 12, my friend John and his dad, we were hunting up in the Okanagan Highlands, just north of Republic. We were up there hunting elk, and we had split into a 3-man formation, one here, here, and here. We moved forward to see if we could find any elk sign. If we did, great. One would end up calling out, and we'd find out. John's dad saw a large male. Large male Sasquatch, I should say. Red hair. And he was moving pretty quick. And he was moving across over to where John was. So his dad ran to where John was. By the time he got there, the male was in full view of John. And what was going on at the same time was where I was at, the female was coming out, and she was walking right in front of me. Did not take any notice of me whatsoever. Didn't look at me, didn't even acknowledge my presence. By the time John got here, I never saw the male. The male had turned that way and the female went over with them. But they were all mostly red-haired. There was a little bit of graying on the female, but they were all pretty much like your Patty type, but they had the red hair instead. Fairly bulky, which is odd, really. Had a few other incidences that were happening, but then when I was in high school, I did counseling. I was a counselor for the outdoor school program for the Evergreen School District. As part of that, the Evergreen School District, 5th graders go out to Camp Bonnevillle at the time, and they go out to learn about trees, birds, animals, the whole thing, outdoor school. And they're there for 2.5 days, and then they switch out, and another school group comes in halfway and finishes out the week. As a counselor, you're there for those 5 days, and you take care of those campers while they're there. Once, 8 o'clock rolls around, you have your own time, so you can go do what you want. I myself, we had just had campers switch over. It was Wednesday night. I went down to what they call the lower pond. It's actually part of Lacamas Creek that they dam off. And when they dam it off, it backflows into a pond. And they also stock it with trout so that the kids can go out there and go fishing and catch fish. I was over there. I was smoking my pipe, tobacco, not the other. And so I was down there smoking. I had just put it out. And I heard what I thought was a deer, because I heard crunch, crunch, and it wasn't too loud. So I'm maybe 25% cover. I wasn't particularly hidden in any way, shape, or form. And what I thought was a deer turns out to be a very large male Sasquatch. And he had an apple in each hand. And he's walking out to the lower pond, looking at the fish, and he's munching. Now, when you look at this area, you can pull it up on Google Earth, and you can get a sky view of it. And it'll show you everything. I can point to you exactly where I was standing and where it was. He's over there crunching on the apples, and he munches away at one, tosses it, and then he starts eating the other one and tosses it. And he's looking at the water, and he's not paying attention. I'm 60 feet away. There's no way he could not have seen me. If he didn't, well, there's something else going on. He's sitting there, looking at the water, looking at the fish, and then out of nowhere, he starts sniffing the air. And then he literally is sniffing, locks eyes right on me. Eye contact, full. Doesn't say anything. He just sits there staring at me. And then just before he turns to walk away, I hear a very loud woo! And you felt that all the way through you. It vibrated through your body. And then he just turned around and walked right back into the tree line and couldn't see him anymore. The tree line wasn't all that thick, so I should have been able to still see him, but I wasn't. And before I knew it, I was running up the road back to the cabins. I don't know why. I wasn't afraid, but for some reason, my body was moving without my express authority. I ran up there. I didn't tell anybody because it's one of those things. When you grow up in a witch household, a lot of things like this happen. You don't tell people. Salem really wasn't that long ago. You don't out yourself that badly. Now it's a little different story. There is actually a few reports, and this is where it gets fun, because they're military reports from the 104th Timberwolves, which is a Army Reserve unit that used to train out at Camp Bonnevillle. One of them that I personally read was from 1974, in which a couple of the cooks came out of the chow hall and were taking trash out to the dumpster. And there was a male, a female, and a juvenile raiding the dumpster. And as soon as the cook came out, they took off. That is a military document, and it was part of the Fire Watch report. So it's out there. I've read it. I've been more closely involved with the forest people of late, to the point where I regularly have been making contact with them, and they've been making contact with me. At one point in time, one of them, she unlocked a memory that I wasn't able to recover on my own. And when she unlocked it, I realized my family was up on the Goat Rocks, up on Mount St. Helens. I was 2 years old. And the roads up on Goat Rocks tend to do this. So you have different levels. And if you're not careful and you're too close to the road, you can slide down to the next level, which can be 75, 100, 200 feet, depending on where it is. And you could really get hurt. I did that. I walked too close to the edge, and I slid down to the next. I must have knocked myself out, whatever. I was missing a glove, and I was missing one of my boots. And I was wearing those really thick 1970s snowsuits that they used to make us wear. How embarrassing. But basically, all I remember, and this is my actual memory, I only remember being up at the top of the road, sitting on the frozen road. Turns out a female with reddish brown hair picked me up and took me back up. And I was bleeding. I must have hit my head. But when my parents went down, they went down to end up getting to where I had fell, and they found my glove and they found my boot, but they didn't find me. But they found large footprints going up the side of the roadway, going upward back up to the next tier. And that's where they found me, sitting in the middle of the road, even though they knew I fell going down the opposite way. She saved me. I had no memory of that until she gave that back to me. I don't know how they do that, how they can unlock memories, but there's a lot of people who they have blocked memories when they encounter them, whether they're able to handle it or not. For some reason it happens. And that happened when I was a child. Maybe it was too much trauma. I don't know. Over the last few years, I've had a lot of things, and they've followed me from place to place. We've moved a few times. We had lived in Eagle, Idaho for a while, and we had literally nightly, 2 to 3 times every night, the sound of someone coming up and kicking our front door. And that could happen, and you'd be looking out your window, and you could see right where the front door was, and there'd be no one there. First, I thought it was ghosts. Obvious, it could be, right? No. Turned out, as I found out later, no, it wasn't. It was the forest people, so it was a Sasquatch encounter. And that was happen every day, 2 to 3 times throughout the day. One night, around 2 o'clock in the morning, I had that same bump. So I got up and I watched, very much like other people have seen, where a Sasquatch cloaks and they look like the predator. This is about a 7.5, 8 foot tall, walked right through, didn't open the door, walked through the front door, continued walking through the hallway, all the way out to the backyard, walked right through the wall. I thought that was a ghost. I didn't know. Later did I find out, yeah, this is all Sasquatch activity. You can know that something's real, but that doesn't mean that you know the ins and outs of what they really are and what they can do. I found out that, yeah, they can do a lot more than what we thought. People are like, yeah, that's bullshit. No, not really. I found out by having endless discussions with an old friend of mine named Henry that a lot of this is easily explained with quantum physics. A lot of things become very possible by utilizing the quantum fields, which, when you stop and really understand it, it's the basics of witchcraft, it's the basics of shamanism, all the mystical traditions. It is us utilizing the quantum field. So that happened. We also had orbs that would show up. Large ones, small ones. Photographed them. I have pictures of them. Just a lot. And we had Sasquatch sightings in the area. We weren't very far away from the Boise River at the time. And there were a lot of sightings down there. Then we moved back here, and it continued. Some people call that the hitchhiker effect, but it's not. You find out you've been marked. They know who you are. As far as I know, my family has been marked for generations. Kind of goes without saying, because otherwise, how would my mother and grandmother and so on be able to tell you, yeah, these beings are real, unless they've had interactions with them in the past? So, family tradition, so to speak. But here at this house, we've had a lot of things happen. We've had slaps on the wall. We've had knocks on the wall. We've seen things moving around the house. We've had things appear out in the yard. We've had, not just with Sasquatch, but as in the little people, fae, other beings have shown up as well. Literally, we've seen, little 2.5 foot tall, gray skinned, pointy eared little goblins out in the yard. They just pop in and pop out. And that's only one of many. When we were in Idaho, when we were in Eagle, we had a lot of UFO sightings there. A lot of the red orbs where it would be one large orb and it would break up into 4 or 5 orbs, and then they'd come back together and reform. These things would happen all over the place. Big black triangles with the lights at each corner and one in the center. It was like 300 feet by 300 feet by 300 feet. Completely silent. And it was only about maybe 400 or 500 feet above the house, going over the entire town of Eagle, continuing on into Nampa and Caldwell. The whole thing, there's UFO reports of these different sightings that we had there all over MUFON. I made a few reports myself to MUFON on that, which, if asked, I can give you the file number for the report. But in particular, all of these sightings were always followed by big black government helicopters following them. Most of the time they were coming straight from Mountain Home Air Force Base. But there was a lot of things going on there. It was a convergence of things. That's something else I haven't really mentioned, is I tend to be able to sense a paranormal being at range. Sometimes it's a couple miles away. I know they're there. They know I'm there. I can feel their spiritual pressure at that distance. There were often times when it was much closer. Aberdeen Proving Grounds, when we go out for runs, and that's a bunch of Marines out there doing, we were there for different schools, but we would end up run down by the old chow hall, and we would end up run out by the woods, and you could feel it. That spiritual pressure pushing down on the surface of your skin. You knew they were there. Come to find out, there's been many reports over the years of them actually being there and being seen. Camp Lejeune, North Carolina. Yeah, a lot of them there. 29 Palms, the Yucca Man. Camp Pendleton. They're there too. Fort Lewis is famous for it. Really famous for it. Even overseas. When we were over in Tikrit, or not Tikrit, but Kirkuk, there was an incident. We were at the government building on mission, and we heard shooting, and we heard people yelling, and we weren't sure what was going on. We saw a man come down the street. We were in an overwatch position at that time, so we could see what was going on. A man basically in black clothes, and he had really black skin. When I mean black, I mean like the absence of light. Black skin. And we saw this guy run up. And when I mean run, I mean came running down the road and went straight up a 120-foot tall building and landed up on top of it and continued going. He was being chased by people. But we saw him run up a 120-foot wall. You're not supposed to say what they are. They were jinn. Never seen one before, never seen one since. But that was reported, and I was told quite literally that report would not be filed. Some of the reports that have been filed, some of them are shit canned. They literally get rid of those so that nobody finds out. Now, when I was in Iraq and I filed that report, I literally, RS2, who is our intelligence liaison, he literally showed up at my door and said, "You can't do this. If you file this or anything like this, there are going to be people who are going to want to talk to you, and you do not want to talk to these people." Okay. Literally, that's what Captain Dean told me. Flat out. You don't want to do this. Because the only way that whole conversation would happen is if I wasn't the first one to have that conversation. Now, when I was in Kuwait, we heard stories. And this is before we drove north, because we took 3 days and drove north all the way to Kirkuk from Kuwait. Now, I'll tell you, that was nuts. Especially when I didn't even have a driver's license at the time. And I was a goddamn driver. So, that sucked. We heard stories about the Kandahar Giant while we were there. We heard about that. Before it was ever all over the internet, before any of that shit, we heard hands-on dudes coming in from other areas of operation, and they were talking about that happened. How there was an entire unit wiped out, and then they sent SF to end up checking to see if they were okay, and they ran into the giant. So, just saying, the scuttlebutt was out there before it was on the internet. And here's something that a lot of people don't talk about. Double row teeth. 6 fingers, 6 toes on each. Red hair. Had a bronze spear. Bronze. Can't confirm it. Can't lock it in, but I know enough people that when you start hearing that and there's details like that, most people would think steel, right? Nah, bronze. Because look at where you're at. It's Afghanistan. You're having a lot of copper and you're having a lot of tin, not a lot of steel. You're going to have bronze weapons. Think about it. Crazy, right? And it's completely humanoid. Also, that matches the description of the beings in the Lovelock Cave. red-haired giants. And what did we find in that one? You had fishing equipment, spears, bows, what do you call them? Duck decoys, baskets, and there was what, 70-something bodies that they pulled out of there, that the Smithsonian came in and pulled out of there. But there's plenty of documentation prior to them coming in and snagging it that it was there. If you have the description of the same being all over the world, and a lot of those different people in different parts of the world have not had contact until modern times, what does that tell you? That's real. Because, good example, like with elves. The Alfar, you've got descriptions of the same beings all over the world, including Africa, and a lot, including North America. Native Americans describing the same beings. And a lot of them haven't had contact till modern times. How can you deny that? You can't. Same thing with Sasquatch. Sasquatch, look at them in a European context. Ogres. Beowulf. If you've read Beowulf, that's a Sasquatch right there. Even the description of Grendel's mother, it's a Sasquatch. I don't know. Merlin was said to have been a forest person. He was one of the hairy people. That explains why he was able to do what he was able to do. Quantum physics. If they're able to do that, then think about it. He had objects that were infused. We have objects that are infused. But literally everywhere I've been in the military, there has been quite a few supernatural beings in the area. Not just Sasquatch, we're talking Fae. And as much as a lot of people, when it comes down to it, when they think the Fae, they only think of little people. From what I was taught as a child, the Fae include over 140 different species of beings. The only reason why they are called the Fae is because they all come from places of a similar physic. So they share the same physics, usually different pocket dimensions. A friend of mine, Henry, used to talk about how the forest people, or Sasquatch, lived in different pocket dimensions. And he talked about how they lived underground in particular. Well, they do. But a lot of these pocket dimensions are in places around the world that are accessible by caves, by lava tubes, by different tunnel systems. They basically lead to a gate or a portal that goes into these different pocket dimensions. People talk about Shasta all the time. Shasta is a very good example. No, there is no inner city, no inner thing there. But within the same space, in an altered dimension, there is. Pocket dimensions can be right next to you. You would never know it. Because they occupy a different shift or a phase shift in reality. It is frequencies away from where you are, but untouchable, untangible, unknowable, unless you are able to match that frequency. Let's face it, military bases, more often than not, are built in the places that no one wants to be. That's why the old nickname is, it's the land that God forgot. They're all places that nobody wants to build, nobody wants to live at. So you have vast unoccupied areas. You have huge training areas where if you're going to be going out and doing maneuvers, well, there you go. You have plenty of room. And most of the time, you don't have anybody out there bothering you. So it makes a perfect habitat for anyone visiting from wherever they are coming from. Fort Lewis, really good example. You have miles of unoccupied area. And there has been a lot of reports about things going on there at Fort Lewis in particular. There were times when I came back from Iraq, I stayed on active duty for a few more months before coming off active duty. And you could end up hearing things. Literally, you would hear from time to time, you'd hear hoots, you'd hear whoops, you'd hear knocks from time to time, you'd hear screams, especially at night, depending on where you were at on the base. Certain parts, oh yeah. Yeah, you'd hear it a lot. It just kind of depends on where you were at. So, yeah, there was more than enough going on there. Like for me, I always felt their presence. I could always tell when they were there. There have been a lot of reports over the years where going back, I'd say, in particular, going back to the 80s, or in particular 1980, that there were additions brought onto the base of these paranormal beings. I won't say where, but I do know of a few stories that coincide with that. But that basically has increased over the years, as their population has also increased over the years. I know 29 Palms in particular, they have found areas out in the Delta Corridor, which is basically a bombing range where they also fire rockets, fire artillery, that they've had multiple sightings out there. Footprints, you name it, all kinds of odd things happening. There's even been basically like what do they call it? When you stack rocks, but they were doing it with artillery shells. Like literally unexploded artillery rounds and mortar rounds and stuff like that. So if like you tried to do that, you might blow yourself up. So somebody was able to do that. And there was one of them that was like 8 feet tall, like literally like stacked all these rounds up like 8 feet tall. And it was very thin, and there's no way it should have been able to stay standing. I had a buddy of mine who took pictures of it back in the day, and yeah, nobody could figure that one out. And they weren't glued, they weren't anything. They were just stacked gently on top of each other, about 8 feet tall. 8 feet tall. And they were all, I don't know if they were duds or just unexploded artillery, but that was one thing that happened, and it's kind of amusing, really. I've gotten a few gifts over the years. Good example, I wear this. I learned as a kid how to end up carving runes and how to infuse things with the runes so that they would have different physical effects. That's one reason why I wear this. But recently, over the last few years, In particular, this little object, it just popped out of nowhere. Just showed up one day. And basically, we're in a very residential area. We don't have deer around here. Not really. Having a deer go miles and miles into twisting neighborhoods with lots of traffic and other things would be very odd. And then to end up having something like this show up, and then later finding that it was a gift meant for other things that was left by the forest people. In particular, it also emits different energies. Some might say it has a mind of its own, might even jump out at you. So, evidently that's happened. So, basically, this showed up out of nowhere. The same day, I had a cloaked being here in the backyard. 2.5 hours after that, someone, I don't know who or what, slaughtered all our neighbors' chickens, one at a time, until all of them were silenced. All of them. Blood and feathers all over the ground, and the chicken hutch had been ripped open, and the only way to do that is if you have hands. And strong hands. So, that all happened the same night I got this. Recently, I was gifted something. It's a stone. A very odd one. It tends to emit electricity, which is weird. It electrifies your arm when you or your hand when you end up feeling it. It emits heat, and it interacts with different things. It causes, or it how should I say? It tends to interact with certain people, with certain other objects, in particular crystals, in particular electronic devices. Literally, if I use the screen on my phone, my entire arm gets electrified. Doesn't even have to be in my hand. It can be in my pocket, and it does that. Checkout screens, like say the store, Safeway, does the same thing. Sometimes it can actually get quite painful. I mean, really powerfully painful. I've checked the perimeter of this yard, put this down in the middle of it, checked to see if any of the effects would, depending on how far or where I'd walk, if they diminished. They do not. Which, as others have told me as well, leads us all to think that this area has been so saturated by paranormal activity that the whole area is pretty much a convergence of mystic energy one way or another. But it reacts with people, it reacts with animals, electronic devices, crystals. It's odd. And it just appeared out of nowhere, just like the other. And I literally had been in the area 2 minutes beforehand. I came back to the area, poof, there it is. In a place that it could not have been anywhere else. It just appeared on the lawnmower bag. Just literally appeared there. And the funny thing is I had I have a couple of huckleberry bushes in planters. One of them kept getting knocked over. And I kept going back over and picking it up. Then I heard it happen again. And I was like, man, did I not place that right? I go over there, straighten it up, and that's when I saw this. And the funny thing is when I got this was white. It literally darkened to this color in 2 days. And I don't know why. Doesn't make sense. The stone doesn't emit any electromagnetic activity, but it reacts sometimes to a magnet, where it sometimes will be attracted to the magnet, sometimes it repels the magnet, and sometimes it doesn't do anything at all, as though it was never magnetic in the first place. Some people, when they hold it, it turns their hand numb, or parts of their hand. Other times, it gives them pins and needles all the way up. I don't know why. My opinion is that the forest people had the ability to do something very similar to hermetic alchemy. And that's how they're able to infuse it. Part of this on here looks like a little blood smear. And if that's the case, that would make sense. If some of them is infused into it. I don't know. I really, there is so much that I don't know. But it's fun trying to figure it out. With the years that I've spent dealing with the forest people, a lot of it I never really understood that a lot of the phenomenon was actually them. Thought it was ghosts, thought it was this, thought it was that. But turns out a lot of it's actually them. And some of the other beings that you'll find in the woods and elsewhere. But in particular, some of that, like the knocks. I don't know who's been out in the woods, but if you heard that many knocks, you have a being that big, that powerful, beating on a tree with a club, you'd have a lot of destroyed trees. I think that they have the ability to imitate any sound and that they can make it happen. Just literally bring it into being. When we lived in Idaho, they would knock at it was like the door was being kicked 3 to 4 times, 2 to 3 times every night. Here we've had knocks on the house over 10 feet up in height on the wall. And it comes directly from that. You can hear the focal point of where it comes from. We've seen beings out here cloaked. Given the size, I can only guess that it's the forest people. Sometimes I've seen some that are 8 to 10 feet tall, and you see the distortion moving. It's not just an ocular problem, it's something real there, because it can interpose between you and another object, causing a visual distortion. Kind of like with the predator. You see that. There's other things, in particular mind speak. That happens a lot. Some might go, well, that's just your imagination. No, it's not. Most people, when they think in their own voice. There are some people, that's all they can do. Some people, a very small amount of them, they don't hear their own voice in their head at all. Maybe 35%. The other 65, we hear our own voice. So it's really, really gets your attention when you hear someone else's voice, especially if that voice is female and you are not. That will definitely wake you up real quick. And then usually it's a few statements. Then it continues into full-on conversations. There's been times where basically when these objects have shown up, that I've had conversations with them. In particular, there are two females that I've talked with quite often. I won't say their name, but we're on a first name basis. And that's just how it is. There is something that I was told by them. What one knows, they all know. For some reason, maybe it's quantum communications or faster than light communications, where the second one knows it, it gets broadcast to all the others. I don't know. I don't know how they work. I know what I've experienced. They also, there was an incident that happened not very long ago. I thought I had a heart attack and went to the hospital. And one of them, she showed up. Nobody could see her. Nobody could sense her. I knew she was there. I could feel her touching me, in particular touching my head. And she was constantly telling me, "You're going to be okay. You're going to be okay." Turns out I was okay. Yeah, I had a little minor infarction, which means a kind of tiny heart attack, but I came home and I went to bed that night. I woke up and there were two of them standing over my bed. And one of them kind of gently pushed me down, said, "Go back to sleep. You're going to be fine." I started to, what's the word I'm looking for here? Against my will, started to go back to sleep. Woke back up and I felt hands in my chest. The room around me was glowing bright. And they were working their hands in my chest. That day, my pulse rate and my heart rate was like it was like 192 over like 117. It was really bad. Not long after that, the next day, my blood pressure, my heart rate was like 130 over 70. It's a huge shift, especially after that. And so far, my doctor has not been able to find the tiny little dead spot in my heart, which has to be there if I had an infarction. That's just how that works. But so far, it's not there. I don't know. It's not the first time that they've worked on me, did the, what they used to call that back in the 70s, psychic surgery. But not quite the same. This is more quantum surgery, not psychic. Yeah, this doesn't seem like psionics to me. And I know a few things about psionics, so yeah, it's not that. Something way beyond it. It's beyond our ability at this moment. But they're willing to teach us that. And that's the thing. I don't hide my intentions with them. I want to learn how to do what they do. Because I know we used to be able to do that. As a people, we used to have that. But we don't anymore. And they let you know that. Somehow, somewhere, we screwed up. And now we have a chance to learn it again. And they've come to a few other people, more than a few, and let them know, hey, we can do this. I've heard quite a few tales of people that they've helped heal in the past. Spoken to a few of those people, and they seem pretty good now compared to what they were. And I know from my experience, yeah, they've done some stuff, and I'm still here to talk about it. There's been a lot of mystical things that have gone on in my life. I've seen a lot of different beings over the years, and that's only because of the fact that I've always been open to it. There's an old saying, believing is seeing. Yeah, I know. The Santa Claus, right? That's it. Gotcha, Tobe. So, that's really it. If you can't acknowledge that something is there, you're never going to see it. Once you understand and accept the understanding that this being is there, being is real, that opens you up. Doesn't matter which types of beings that is, whether it's the Fae, whether it's Dogman, whether it's Sasquatch. The first step is understanding that they're real. They could be standing right next to you right now. And unless you have that understanding, that conviction that they are there, you will never know. And knowing is where it comes from. That is the first step to contact.